alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading, and I'm Tim Niederreiter. Jeez, I already screwed it up. And with me tonight is Marc Watson once again. Welcome back, Marc.
Thank you very much, Tim. I am super excited to be back again. I love talking to you.
It's always a good time, and seeing as how we're both writing fantasy these days, I'm pretty pleased to have you back. It seems pretty timely because I have a book coming out in like 2 weeks from the dropping of this podcast, and it's kind of a stressful time, I've got to say.
When it's just about to come out, it really is. It's the point where there's nothing else that you can do anymore, right? Or at least there's very little you can do. You're in the home stretch, and it's got to get out there into the world, and you're like, oh my God, I've suddenly realized I don't like this part of the plot or this character name, and there's nothing you can do anymore. You're done. It's
right.
Rushing out the door.
And oh my God, the map needs work. That's where I was at, earlier today. Because it is a fantasy book, it's going to have a map, just a city map, because it's not. Most of my book actually takes place in the city. It's not like a world map. We're not roaming across a great continent or anything in this particular book. But anyway, how are you doing? You're the guest. I've been such a poor host so far.
That's okay. I like hearing what you're working on too. You are a host, but you are also one of us, Tim. You are clearly one of us. You go through the same trials and tribulations we do, and listening to you talk to other people about it, whether you're interviewing or being interviewed, I can relate. I really can. But to answer your question, I'm doing great. My son's baseball season has just ended yesterday, and I finally have some free time for 2 weeks, and then hockey season starts. But I am I'm enjoying a little bit of downtime right now, and reading and writing at levels that I have not in months.
Cool. That's good, but I'm surprised hockey season starts in late August.
Well, a lot of parents will put their kids in camps. Those camps go for about a week or two, and then once those camps are over, the initial tryouts for the season are usually at the beginning of September. So I've got a camp, and I've got like a 1 week window, and then school and hockey usually starts on the same week, if not the same day. The last few years, it's been the same day.
Well, I'm not really much of a sports guy, but hockey. It's not as big here as it is in our neighbor to the north, but Minnesota has a fair amount of hockey.
It does. Even up here, we're like Minnesota, they know their hockey. There's a couple of states where we can say they know hockey, and that hockey is what they do, and Minnesota is one of them. I'd probably also give a nod to like Colorado and certain parts of New York, but not all of it.
Just got a little just choice elements. But
yes.
Actually, one last thing about sports, even though this show is Alive After Reading it, we are going to talk about writing and books and stuff. But one last thing about sports, it's just because it's interesting, because I walk by this ice rink like every day. It's empty most of the year, right? Or at least not about half the year, because the rest of the year it's covered in ice. Yes. But right now it's the summer, so it's just an interesting thing to walk by. It looks like a pen. What goes in there? It's a pen for ice. You put kids in there. In the winter.
Some places up here use it to store gravel until they need the gravel, so then they take the gravel out to get ready for the winter and then restock it with water for ice.
Yeah, mine just has grass at the bottom during the year. During the summertime. Yeah. So anyway, you said you've had time to be writing. Do you have a new book or you're working on, or what's going on with that?
I've been doing a lot of short story writing lately. It's something that I've never really kind of embraced wholly, but I have been doing it a lot and trying to get myself out there into different collections and contests, and jumping into writing the way that I did, I feel as though I kind of missed a few steps. So it's been me going back and trying to cover things because I never really had an opportunity to do it. I just was like, I'm releasing a book. Actually, it's 2. Now it's 3. And it was it was just such a rush. And now that I don't have a really big project on the way, but I still have these smaller things coming out, I am just kind of embracing that and seeing where it takes me. And it's been a great experience, but it's also been a really humbling one as well.
Oh, I can only imagine. I mean, actually, I can't only imagine because I've been writing a lot of short stories this summer too. I've written 3, I believe, which is a lot for me. And go on.
I was just going to say that, but that's still great because, I mean, depending on how you write, in the amount of time that we have as writers, unless we're doing this full time, 3 short stories is amazing, depending on their length and content and such. I mean, how depth you want it to be.
Yeah, the first one was about 5,000 words long. That took the longest. The second one probably took 2 or 3 days. And that one was about 6,500 words long. No, about 7,000 words long, maybe. Mm-hmm. And they're all for anthologies that I was part of I was basically semi-guaranteed a spot in due to connections. So I'm pretty happy about that. And I think they're all accepted at this point. Except for the last one. The last one actually was my kind of my favorite, but I'm not sure if it's actually going to get accepted. Because it's a little weird.
And I feel the same way, only because I had one come out in an anthology earlier this year, and same thing. I'm not going to say I was guaranteed a spot, but it was with one of my original publishers, the publisher of Death Dresses Poorly, and so I'm going to say I had an in, although it still all depends on the quality of the writing. The second one less so, and that one is actually in an anthology that comes out this coming weekend, so very fortuitous timing. And then there is a third one that I've been trying to get out there, and it's really weird for me because it's not fantasy, it's not science fiction, it's just I'm going to call it urban prose. I don't really know what else to call it.
Literature. You wrote literature. How dare you?
It is. Yeah, it borders on that, although the subject is still hockey, so it's still kind of me.
Okay, well, there's such a thing as sports literature, I think.
There is. There's
the young adult books too, where there's quite a few of those young adult or middle grade books, which are basically about sports, and they're not
for sure
science fiction or fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. My son reads a bunch of them. So, yeah, it was just something different for me. But that's the one that I've tried to get it out there at least once, and it wasn't picked up. So I'm still working on getting it out into the world. But I'm super proud of it. It was something I wanted to write because I went back and I reread my favorite book, which is The Shipping News by Annie Proulx. And I've always said that I cannot write characters the way she does. I cannot paint worlds the way that she does. And I was totally okay with that. So after I'd released books and a short story and had another short story picked up, I'm like, well, what if I tried? What would happen then? And I did try, at least in my own way, putting my own spin on it. And I'm really happy with the results, but it's very difficult for Marc Watson, the science fiction fantasy writer, to put something out there like that because it's a world I don't know.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess I've written all the genres I published. I sent off to these short stories before, except for the one. No, I've even written urban fantasy. These all took place in settings of mine that I already had written, except for one. The second one actually was in this new setting but it's one I've had in my head for a while, which is the one where it's post-apocalyptic and the world is flooded. So it's not like a little bit. Like there are mountains that are islands now, and there's nothing else.
That's going dangerously close to territory you don't want to go to with me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, wander away.
Because the only reason why is Waterworld is my least favorite movie of all time, and if you want to spend the rest of this conversation with me telling you about why, we could.
Let's steer clear of that and gently ease it back. My story also featured mermen who were savage and killer, so they flooded the world. Presumably, they drowned it. And and so now people are moving around in boats, and they got to contend with these, portals from which mer people emerge. Anyway, that was what that story was about, and I think it's kind of funny because it was the first short story I've dictated, and I made so many mistakes when I was editing it that I'm like, okay, good thing, and the editor just said like, you may want to fix this, You refer to the mer people as something that is a completely different word. I mean, she didn't realize I was even referring to them because I had used a placeholder word because no dictation software would pick up mer people. but then I didn't take all of them out. So some of the placeholder words were still in there. Thank goodness for editors. Oh, geez.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, my God, yes.
And I haven't really worked with editors in this kind of capacity before, so it was pretty interesting. And now I've done it. I've done 2 of the short stories that basically been edited and they're done. But it was really kind of like, okay, it's pretty stressful. And that's why I'm kind of concerned about the last one. If you don't mind me talking about this for a second, the last short story I wrote was for this anthology that should actually be coming out pretty soon here, probably in September. But no spoilers. We're not going to be telling. It's meme based though, so that's why it started. Because I only had like 10 days to actually write it, and I only wrote it in 1 day. To actually got out an hour. Took it an hour and dictated it. And I was very pleased because it was like, it was 66 minutes, start to finish, whole story. It was kind of incredible, the feeling there. But it ended up having this, like, because I kind of the concept of like this guy who thinks he's destined to be to meet the aliens, basically. Mm-hmm. And then he finds out there's no such thing as aliens. And not only was he not destined to meet them, he's not important at all. Basically. And that's the end of the story. And I know it's a bit of a spoiler. I'm not going to tell you which story it is. But I guess if or which anthology it is, you'll have to guess. There'll be at least 3 anthologies. You won't know which one. I guess, whatever. Maybe that narrows it down too much. But my point is, if you're going to buy all 3 anthologies, you're dead anyway. So whatever. So this short story, though, is like, okay, so I don't know if that's going to be a crowd-pleasing story. That's my main worry with it, because it's kind of a tragic or like gloomy ending. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. It's difficult when you're kind of punching out of your weight class because everything suddenly becomes new again. All the confidence that you had from whatever previous successes you had suddenly fly out the window, and you suddenly have to question yourself so much more than you did when you were kind of in a groove doing what you do best. At least that's what I found. I questioned a lot more, and it took me a lot longer to write this short story I'm talking about. That's only about 5,000 words, maybe even a little bit under that. But I went over it so much more than the one that's in the anthology that I've got coming out this weekend, because it was kind of outside my wheelhouse. It's purely science fiction, which I'd never written before, but it's still in the realm of genre fiction that I'm very comfortable with versus what this other one was that I wrote. So I get it. I understand.
Yeah. Confidence has always been kind of a weak point for me when it comes to actually writing fiction. Not always, but it has been for a while. And it's weird because it seems like the longer I've written fiction, the less confident I've been that I'm good at it. But yet I'm sure the better I've gotten. It's very strange. It's just my complex. We don't have to get into that necessarily.
Well, I know that we've brought it up in conversation before, but I still get it. I can still say, well, I've read your work, and I don't see anything for you to lack confidence of. But it doesn't really matter what I say, because we as authors we're going to form our own opinions of ourselves, regardless of what the world at large thinks. So. Right?
Yeah, it's all in my head, right? It's just insanity. But anyway. So, no novels in the pipeline at the moment? You said you didn't have do you have any ideas for books? Are you planning to get back to that?
I do. And I admittedly am about, where am I at? Where's that most recent? About 55,000 words deep into something new, for something that I'm aiming for between 75 and 80. So, I am kind of 2/3 of the way there. So, but I'm not feeling confident enough right now that I can finish that off to the point where I'm satisfied with it. It's more urban fantasy again, with kind of like science fiction bent to it. I guess I kind of say it's similar to things like Lost and The Leftovers and The 100 and that kind of thing. Like
okay.
it's kind of borderline science fiction fantasy, and it's something that I wanted to write that my wife would enjoy, because she doesn't normally read the kind of things that I butter my bread with, as it were. So it's not a lack of confidence. It's just I want to make sure that I'm going to get it right. And there's a couple of things about writing the ending I'm not 100% on yet, but I have a sizable chunk done, but I'm still kind of, like I said, I'm reading and I'm dawdling around with these other little things, and I'm finding success with them, and I'm having more fun doing that right now. And I'm all about, where is my mind at the time? Where am I having the most fun? And where, not the, can I have the most success, but where can I go the farthest with, or what can I go the farthest with right now? And that is with the short story stuff. So it still sits there, and I know that when I sit down and I give myself a kick in the pants, it'll come together. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now, and as somebody who has very little time to write naturally, I want to enjoy what it is I'm doing as much as I can when I get the chance to do it.
That's actually extremely wise. Enjoying what you do is more important than being confident in it. That's my opinion.
I'd agree.
I sure hope it is, because confidence is in short supply here. But enjoyment, that I can find.
I hope that it is true, because that's what I'm doing. And if I'd hate to find out that I've just wasted all these precious hours just going down this road that is got no end. I don't think that's true. And like I said, I've 2 short stories coming out, and 3 for yourself. I mean, we seem to be doing the right thing whenever we do kind of take these little dalliances into short stories and things that we're not doing very often. But I'd hate to find out I'm wrong. I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, that's the tragedy of reality, is you never really know. Yeah. Anyway, or maybe that's actually the convenience of reality. You don't have to actually know the truth. It's okay. Nobody does. Anyway, that's maybe a little bit in my personal philosophy here, but it is interesting too that when you kind of have this novel which you're not exactly stuck on, but you put it on the shelf. And I mean, with me, I put a lot of books on the shelf, and a lot of them I'm not sure if I'll come back to, because it's been years in some cases. These things have been collecting dust,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Half-finished books, 60,000, 70,000 words in some cases. But I do have one, I've this, because I'm kind of moving toward more epic fantasy, I'm like, okay, this is time. Eventually, I'm going to get to one of these books. I'm not sure if I've ever mentioned on this podcast before, but it's a series that I started. I wrote 50,000 words into the first book. I'm like, this is pretty cool, but I don't know where I'm going with this. It really went, it kind of derailed at one point. I mean, like, I knew the story was pretty strong, but I didn't know what I was doing exactly. And that was Temple Theater, which is this story about basically people fighting giant robots in a fantasy world. Anyway, and yet it's called Temple Theater. I know it's confusing. But also they perform plays for the gods. That's why it's Temple Theater. Should have probably started with that one. But anyway,
but
they also, but their job is but then they end up fighting giant machines, just like gigantic mechanical golems or whatever. And it's pretty weird. But I don't know. I've been thinking about getting back into that one. I'm not sure when I'm going to have time for it, though. I just started a new series that's not that. Oh well, such is life.
There's very little consistency when you talk from one writer to another. Like when you start hanging out in writing circles, everybody's got a different technique. Everybody's got a different opinion on how much you should write and plotter or pants or whatever. But the one thing that I think I've found most consistent between writers is that we all have that pile of stuff that we've started writing. We're really excited about it, but no, I'm not going to do anything with it right now. Maybe it'll come to me later. Like everybody kind of has that to-do pile as a writer.
Right, a mound of stories.
Yeah, I don't think I've met one yet that doesn't have something to that effect. Like I carry a flash drive with me that probably has story ideas for 20 different novels or so. But how many of those are going to come to fruition in my lifetime? Likely very few, but they're there and they kind of keep me motivated to come back to them. And some people just have their notepad that they jot things down on or whatever, but it seems to be a consistent with authors.
Yeah, I mean, most of the authors I've met have had that kind of thing going on. Though I've also and a lot of the younger authors, more authors my own age actually, are more. These most authors my age are behind me as far as their careers. They're younger than me as far as their careers of actually writing books. So I started at quite a young age, and I have a few people in my writing group specifically. Actually, I think IQ Malcolm. Actually, I've had them both on the show. Drew Bernardi and IQ Malcolm, both in my writing group, and both of them are more like, now I have to come up with another story idea. I'm like, really? You didn't just have one? It surprised me. It's kind of funny. I mean, I kind of admire that situation, though. I'm like, okay, so you actually can create something new instead of just looking at stuff on your shelf and say, maybe I should finish that.
I don't know if I'd necessarily say I'd admire it. I think I'd have a panic attack if I suddenly wrote a bunch of things and put it out there, and I was like, well, I've got nothing left. Oh my God, I've got nothing left. Oh, and then I'd probably just crawl in a corner and die, or just like frantically start writing down horrible, horrible ideas just so that way I've got something to work with.
Well, I don't think I guess I didn't want to make it sound like these guys.
There's not enough novels about cooking in the backcountry with
lamp monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
We're gonna play. It's all the story's gonna be basically going to be about a bug zapper. Anyway, we're gonna go camping. That's my feeling now. But I wasn't trying to make it sound like these guys are bereft of ideas. It's just like they get to choose a new idea. I always feel like I've got something lined up, which is maybe where I'm like, wow, am I spoiled or are they spoiled? I can't tell. Maybe it's just maybe we're even. I don't know. Maybe it's just different, not better or worse.
And that can be attributed to writers' different techniques and how we handle things, but I feel the same way as you. I always have something in the queue somewhere. I always have something in the lineup, and the lineup's moving about as fast as the DMV. Like the processing level of information on the other side of the desk is just as fast and the exact same as the DMV, actually. So it's a long process for me. So I'm envious of them, but I'm also at least constantly confident that when I'm done working on something, I know I've got something else. So there's a level of reassurance to that realization. So I'm going to be happy with it personally. I don't want to find out another way. Yeah. I'm happy this way.
I don't think a whole lot of writers run out of ideas. That's one thing I'm pretty sure about. And by a whole lot, I mean probably none. Probably no writers are running out of ideas anywhere. I think it's really, I mean, it's interesting too, because I'm reading this book. I guess this is kind of the reading section. I mentioned this last week, but I'm reading Wonder Boys by Michael Chabon, and it is about a writer. It's a literary fiction book, so that's kind of why I was like, "Oh, you wrote literary fiction? Oh my!" Because I'm not really a huge fan of literary fiction, but this book's really kind of fun, and it's about a writer who has a 3,000-page manuscript that still is half. It's like, and then he goes through his outline. It's like I'm on the 4th page of 9 pages.
Mm-hmm.
His book's already 3,000 pages long. He's done less than half the outline. Like, okay, that's kind of insane. And so because he's a professional writer, like he just needs to get his book sold so his editor can make a living and he can have a career still. And I just don't think it's going to work out. I said this last week too. I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a disaster. I have a feeling. I'm still not done with the book, but it's kind of funny how, the writer who just can't finish a book and doesn't feel like they can do anything else is kind of the stereotype, actually. I think this book was made into a movie. And I'm like, oh no, I could just drop a book. Yeah, I could drop a book like I dropped metalworking, back in college. I could do that. Because I just found out welding wasn't for me,
Did it have Michael Douglas in it? I want to say it had Michael Douglas in it.
I haven't seen the movie. I'm only reading the book.
I haven't either, but I'm pretty sure that has Michael Douglas. So
okay, that's probably
that's a good start then.
Yeah, I mean, but and this guy in the book he's like this real smart ass, but he doesn't know anything about what he's trying to do. It's very like I said, it's literature, but at least it's kind of fun literature. And it's an interesting one too because, like I said, I'm gonna repeat myself a little bit, but from last week, so people, you can just tune me out for a second. I really like the characterization in this book, even though it's very overt. It's like, okay, things are overtly strange in this book.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a good lesson, though. because when you take a character and you make them too subtle, the audience often doesn't know what to make of them. And when you take a character and make them kind of outrageous, well, then at least people know where they stand with that character. Yeah, and it's very difficult to make subtle characters at least in a lot of what I'm writing. Absolutely. It's more that they have to be characters in the broad scope of the world, of the word, right? Like they have to be identifiable when the reader is reading. Whose perspective is this? Who are we talking about? Who lives in this space? And they have to be identifiable. I know for a fact that I am not good enough to write a subtle character. I have to write something more grandiose than that. Or if it is a subtle character, it's the only subtle character, and being subtle is what makes them unique. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I'm just reminded of a friend of mine in college who was one of the loudest guys I've ever met, loudest geeks I've ever met, and he would just go around shouting, "I'm subtle" sometimes. Anyway. I think I had somebody very similar to that in my life at that same time. Yeah, there's probably at least one per campus, I'd imagine. But yeah, anyway, he's a good friend of mine. But it's just amusing. It's amusing though when you think about like, you know, because I think most people have relatively subtle personalities. You can dive deep into a person in real life by you meet them, you become friends with them, you hang out with them a long time, but then and you're still learning things about people 5-10 years later. But in a book, you don't have time for that, really. It's weird because in a movie, again, also in a movie, you have even less time, right? Like the audience has almost no time with characters in movies, especially modern movies, like the Hollywood movies. But in a book, you have like a mix. You know, you can get pretty deep into a character pretty fast. But if that character doesn't stand out, people aren't going to care. I think is a big factor. For sure. Anyway, I don't know. I've recently been getting some good notes on my characterization from reviews, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. People think I'm doing this right, and that's such a surprise to me. Because I'm not confident in characterization, as the theme today is I'm not confident in anything, but I'm definitely not characterization, you know. I fight against that statement. You are clearly confident speaking because you host this show and you talk at length about the dictation process. So there, you are confident speaking. Okay, fine. So I'm confident in that one thing. From the outside looking in, anyway. I'm not going to tell you what you're confident in. I'm just going to say. I suppose, yeah, because confidence is totally subjective, right? But go on, yeah. I'm just going to say that you exude confidence in doing this, which is just about the best that the outside world can hope for about you. You might not believe it, but the rest of the world is like, yeah, that dude can speak. Wow, nice. That's a good compliment. Maybe we should wrap the show up on that. No, no. I do have one more question for you because I feel like I've kind of dominated the conversation. I think this is kind of a running theme now. But I definitely have a question about your other books and how your books you already have out. Let's say, were any of those books that you picked up from your stack of old stories at some point? Yes and no. When I was writing Catching Hell and getting it ready for release, I kind of thought the same thing because it took place in a world that I've been writing in since I was about 16 years old, like this world that I've created. Now, those stories that I wrote are not these. What I ended up doing when I originally had I wrote a prologue in the first chapter, and I did that, I want to say 13 years ago. I just had this really great idea for an introduction into this next part of this world that my stories had kind of been residing in for so long. And as I wrote those, I was really happy with them, but I was not in a place at all in my life where I could do anything resembling writing. And as time went on, then I slowly started to pick them up again. And when I did have that time suddenly, I'm pretty sure we've spoken about it before, but I was working in a labor job. I didn't have a whole lot of mental stimulation, so I'd tuck myself away in a cubicle in an engineering company, and I would write. And that's how Catching Hell came about, because I would write for 45 minutes to an hour every day in a little quiet cubicle.
And when I first started doing that, I needed something to jump off of, and all the walking around and things that I've been doing, I was slowly forming these ideas of the story that I had written. At that time, it would have been about 5 or 6 years prior to that. So I did pick that up with like just a prologue and a first chapter isn't that much, but I mean, it was something, and I grabbed it, and then I just kind of expounded on that a little bit, and it became what it is, which is my Catching Hell duology. And eventually I got rid of that prologue because it was stupid, but the first chapter I'm still particularly proud of, and it kind of works as a prologue in its own sense. So I did pick it up from that. When I did Death Rests Poorly, no, that it came from a natural place because the first chapter came from an experience that I had. I mean, for anybody who's read it or gets a chance to read it, just know that the first chapter is almost verbatim something that happened to me in Chicago O'Hare Airport, with the exception of a little bit of the colorful language. And I'm not spoiling anything to say that the main character's mother is dead and he's returning from her funeral, and my mother is very much alive and I love her to death. So that was about the only thing, but that was just where the inspiration came from. But the story itself, it just kind of poured out of me organically there and then, and it came from nowhere that I can personally attest to, but I don't know, somebody more Freudian might be able to dig into where it came from. But it was just here's a story all of a sudden, whereas Catching Hell picked up from something that I had worked on before.
Ah, yes. No, that's nice. I do like I love it when a story just kind of appears, and that's happened to me before as well with my Spells of the Curtain series. That's basically how I wrote the first 3 books. I just kind of like, well, I kind of want to do a fantasy book. I haven't written anything in a while, and then suddenly I had the ideas, and boom, it launched. But yeah, that was a long while ago. That was back 10 years ago or so. For me, that's a fair while. But anyway, we are about out of time. So where can people find your work and your stuff wherever you are found on the internet?
For sure. You can find me all over the digital platforms. You can find my work on Amazon. So my works are Catching Hell Part 1 Journey and Catching Hell Part 2 Destination. Those are my science fiction fantasy epic, as well as Death Dresses Poorly, which is my urban fantasy dark comedy, which was my first release. You can also find one of my short stories in the anthology coming out this weekend, and that is Enigma Front 5, The Stories We Hide. And the story that I have in there is called Highlight Hard Case, and that is my very first foray into the science fiction, pure science fiction, but with a little bit of comedy mixed in there, because that's just how I write. And anybody who wants to track me down can find me at markwatson.ca. That's MarcWatson. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at @WriteWatson. I always hate saying that. Like, you can find me at like repeating myself. But you can find me at @WriteWatson, WriteWatson. And you can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MarkWroteABook.
Nice. Thanks for being on the show, Mark. As for me, you can find more of my podcasts at mentalcellarpublications.com or at Libsyn. And actually, sooner or later, we're going to have more of Mooks and Monsters for you RPG fans. So my co-host is almost done with his theater break for the summer. So we'll be back, and with a vengeance. So it's going to be awesome. But also, more of this show, of course, mentalcellarpublications.com/alive after reading, I think. It's there somewhere. I'm not sure about the exact URL. Anyway, also, you can find my books on Amazon. You can find, currently now, the Pillar Universe series is now exclusive with Amazon from book 1 through book 3. And that start with Stormfleet. It's a good story, and hopefully it'll hook you. That's my space opera series with no space. And then you can also find 10 Liars, the first part of that, on any fine ebook platform for free, so check that out. And of course, there's always the Mangrove Suite for free wherever fine ebooks are distributed. Finally, pre-order Demon Scroll. It's going to be out in 2 weeks or so as of this release. So definitely check that out if you're into epic fantasy. We're talking a full-sized 600-page epic book, and I'm going to have it out there if it kills me. So, boy, it's not going to kill me. Don't worry about it. There'll be more in the series as well. So check that out.
That's why it won't kill you.
Yeah, exactly. I have to survive to write the next book.
You have to survive. You got to finish it off.
Exactly. And yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for being on the show once again, Mark. So have a good one, folks.
That tears it.